All right, so it's 1:31, so I propose we go ahead and get started. I hope everyone had a good lunch break. I spent mine writing text for an NSF AI proposal, so I'm not escaping the theme of AI at all today. Um, so I'm happy to introduce our afternoon keynote speaker, Professor Chris Capozzola, who's a faculty in the history department here at MIT and also our Dean of Digital Learning. He gave a remarkable and impactful talk at our workshop last summer and was one of the primary organizers of the big generative AI workshop that happened here at MIT in November. And I'm excited to have him here to give our afternoon keynote today.
Thank you. So first of all, a word of thanks to all of you for coming, whether you're here or online. Thanks to Logan, to Kevin in particular for your work in assembling this event. And also thank you for letting me sort of be an interloper in this conversation. As Kevin mentioned, I'm a professor of history. My training in physics ended some point during the Reagan administration. And so I do not claim technical expertise, but I do share a passion for teaching and learning and for using digital tools to advance that. And so that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. So my talk today has two titles, one sort of bland and one maybe less bland. Let me give you the bland one. The bland one is Generative AI and STEM Education, the agenda for 2024. And so we're now at a point in a kind of two-day conference when a whole bunch of issues have been raised and put on the table. Some of them have sparked thinking in your own head. Some of them have landed. We're also at the point in a conference where you've all just had lunch and you might be a little bit tired or distracted. So in the spirit of active learning, I'm going to ask you to do something for the next 1 or 2 minutes, which is to confront this question, the agenda for 2024. And ask yourself, right, what is one thing that you believe is on the agenda for generative AI and STEM education in 2024? This thing, it could be a task, something we need to do. It could be a problem, a thorny problem that needs to be tackled. It could be a tool, a technical tool that needs to be developed or innovated, or it could be a policy that needs implementing. And that might be the agenda of an individual student. It could be the agenda of you as an instructor, of a department, a university, a profession, a government entity, right? So hopefully you have been thinking briefly about what might be on the agenda. And now I'm going to ask you in the next 60 seconds or so to talk to somebody else in the room. If you're online, maybe there's a chat feature, or you can just reflect personally. Get up, move around, a little bit of energy in the room for what might be on the agenda in 2024. What is, whether we want it on the agenda or not, what would you want to put there that you think is not currently there? And for those online, we'll do this briefly and we'll be into things in a moment. All right, and now make your way back to wherever you feel most comfortable sitting. All right, I'm gonna bring out my gym teacher voice in a second, right? We're gonna bring this to an end. And I'm gonna ask for two brave people, one on this side of the room and one on that side of the room, to throw me a word. So throw me a word. Okay, all right, so okay, so philosophy, one word on this side of the room. Some brave person who's not Logan or Kevin. Training. Okay. All right. So I'm going to come back to some of these in the middle of the talk. We're going to keep going. Part of that was just my reminder that no matter what lecture you're hauling, no matter how old the people are in the room, active learning is never a bad thing. All right. So my talk this afternoon has a second title, and this is a cheekier one. Generative AI and STEM Education Hype Cycle Year 2. Right? So here we are, right? Navigating a hype cycle, whether you are a consumer, a student, or an institution of higher learning, is a deadly serious business at any time, but particularly so in year 2, when the breathlessness wears off from following the introduction of any new commercial technology. Now, year 2 of a hype cycle is also when technology can cease to disrupt. Social institutions, and here I'm going to be channeling my history and social science hat. Social institutions are powerful forces. Across multiple areas, we can see the power of the regulatory apparatus, scholarly research norms, university and professional education accreditation bodies, consumer protection agencies, state, federal, and EU regulatory bodies. Now, in 2023, we saw those entities begin thinking about generative AI when they were confronted by it. And in some cases, we saw the wheels begin to turn, often with these entities trying to bend their institutions to the disruptions posed by commercially viable, publicly accessible generative AI. We can call 2023 the year that society learned to live with ChatGPT. Now, in year 2, it might actually end up working the other way around, as technologies and for-profit companies that disseminate them bend to existing power structures and their rules, the year ChatGPT learns to live with society. Now, we can expect institutions of governance to act, and those are across the full range of institutions, everything from the MIT Department of Physics to the US Department of Education. And that may make this whole enterprise a little bit less profitable for the for-profit companies. It might make it a little bit less interesting to the disruptors. It will also certainly make it a little bit more accountable to public entities. The question on the table for us in some ways is whether education can also get a little bit better as year 2 unfolds. Or whether social institutions' actions amplify outcomes for high-achieving students while extracting labor and data from the poor and powerless, or whether they might actually improve outcomes for education in measurable and iterative ways, or maybe a little bit of both. Now, we're still, I think, very much in a moment of contingency for where this plays out in year 2. And our choices have consequences. Collective action in particular directions can, in fact, make a difference. Now, I want to draw your attention to 3 developments from national and regional governance bodies, which you may have seen come across the headlines, but which you may not actually have paid all that much attention to in late 2023. And in general, these each are ways, large actions that mention education either directly or indirectly, but that will probably take more direct form in hype cycle year 2. And I urge you to kind of watch the actions of regulatory bodies as they begin to construct social guardrails that may rein in the disruptive possibilities of new technologies. So first, let's begin with the Blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights, issued by the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy in October 2022. These are all easily Googleable, and if you can't find them, come find me after the talk. I'll track them down for you. And this is a Bill of Rights developed sort of by a federal agency acting without power, really to provide guidance, best practices, and norms for artificial intelligence writ large, not specifically for generative AI. Note the date is from October 2022, before the introduction of ChatGPT and other commercial tools. And it makes some general principles that might sound a little bit like Mom and Apple Pie. You should be protected from unsafe or ineffective systems. You should not face discrimination by algorithms. You should be protected from abusive data practices. You should know that an automated system is being used. You should be able to opt out when appropriate, and goes on and on from there. Now, these, again, don't act with power, but they may be touchstones for conversations around regulation as those unfold in 2023. Second, consider the White House Executive Order on Safe, Secure, and Trustworthy Artificial Intelligence from October of 2023. Now, this text does act with power, binding US executive branch agencies, sets norms and expectations that will be turned over the course of 2024 into a more formal guidance. And we can expect this in a range of agencies that we engage with, whether it's the Department of Education, the National Science Foundation, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and so on and so forth. Now, this document touches on teaching and learning in passing in several places, sometimes orthogonally, as in provisions about data privacy and expectations for guidance in that area, that will obviously have implications for commercial tools that we use in the classroom. One section focuses specifically on education. Right? And the presidential order says to protect consumers while ensuring that AI can make Americans better off, the president directs the following action, namely to shape AI's potential to transform education by creating resources to support educators deploying AI-enabled tools such as personalized tutors in schools. Right? That's pretty specific. And what that means is you can expect in 2024 guidance. You can also expect funding. So if any of you are building tutors or thinking about building tutors, keep your eye on that. And you can probably expect levels of accountability for the productions that go along with it. Third, consider the European Union's Artificial Intelligence Act, the outlines of which were agreed to by the European Parliament, Council, and regulators in December of 2023. The EU has announced its plan to subject areas identified as, quote, high risk to, quote, careful regulation. And among those is the broad category of education and vocational training. There are no specifics for this law yet. That's going to be developed over the course of 2024. One does specifically target and seek to ban the use of AI for, quote, emotion recognition, whether in the workplace or educational institutions. But this might involve some of the following. Here I'm borrowing from a blog post, an ongoing blog post by Mia Hoffman at Georgetown Center for Security and Emerging Technology. It's a great site to kind of keep up to date on EU regulation, which can be very complicated and boring. And she says, high-risk AI systems must meet various requirements demonstrating that their technology and its use does not pose a significant threat to health, safety, and fundamental rights. These include a comprehensive set of risk management, data governance, monitoring and record-keeping practices, detailed documentation alongside transparency and human oversight obligations, and standards for accuracy, robustness, and cybersecurity. High-risk AI systems, which means those that involve education, particularly of minors, must also be registered in an EU-wide public database. All right, so that sounds like a lot of work. And that's an agenda for large federal agencies over the course of 2024. So as you're thinking what's on the agenda, those are some of the things. And they will obviously impact the way that we practice education, whether we're in the United States, the EU, or elsewhere. But maybe we could start somewhere smaller than what the EU has to do. And so in the last couple of minutes, let me spend a few minutes on some concrete tasks for educators here in the room and online for 2024 as we navigate Hype Cycle Year 2. And I'm going to suggest 4 tasks. First, do something, right? Something, right? Second, do something good. Third, do something less evil. And fourth, then do it again, right? And so let me talk about each of these 4 in turn. Right, so first, do something, right? And what I mean by that is that when I joined this group last July to talk, I observed that the instructors on our campus at MIT that I worry the most about are not the ones who are, treat this like the Wild West, right? The ones who are leaning into generative AI with their students and paying no attention to the guardrails of FERPA or data privacy or the affordability of the tool. They worry me a little bit, but not as much. And I also worry not as much about those who are staying up all night trying to rephrase their essay prompts, trying to outwit their dishonest students, outwit the large language models. I don't worry too much about them, part because I know they're going to lose. That the people I worry about are the group that I call the ostriches, right? The ones with their heads in the sand, the ones who are teaching in the fall, in the spring of 2024, in exactly the same way that they taught in 2019 or 1999 or 1979. So, as I said last summer, and which I would reiterate here, if you are not addressing AI, if you are not teaching about it and with it, you are actually inadvertently building a hidden curriculum in which the students who already know how to use these tools and the students with that advantage will bring those to bear in the tasks you set for them and the terms by which you are assessing them, right? And so both those tasks and the terms of assessment need to change unless you want to build that hidden curriculum. So first, do something, right? Second, try to do something good, right? The other task is to do something positive, right? And here, I think the answer to the question of what we should teach begins with the question, what do our students need? And it's remarkable how rarely that is actually the question ever asked, let alone the first question asked, let alone systematically answered, whether by a department, a university, or a regulatory body as big as the EU. Right? So if we begin with the highly provisional answer, that our students need AI literacy. AI literacy sort of tentatively defined as understanding generative AI, being equipped to use it successfully, and being equipped to navigate a world in which its use is ubiquitous. Then the answer to that question, what do our students need, I think has three parts. Right? First, it's a series of technical abilities. Right? Things you need to know how the tool works, how the tool can be used. And in STEM fields, we're very familiar with this, distilling these into learning objectives. Associate deans and people like myself love learning objectives. We love writing them down and measuring them. This is an important part of the task. And you will be best situated in your discipline to have those conversations in structured and measurable ways. There are also abstract skills that students need to navigate the world. These are the kinds of things that are not the skills you need for your first job, but the skills that you need for your third job, right? And I always say, because I teach history at MIT, history is terrible preparation for your first job, but it's a really good preparation for your third job, right? You know that society is complex, people are irrational, and that the way we did things before shapes the way we do things in the future. And I think that's the same with science, and in fact, all the STEM fields, but particularly for the physical and natural sciences. Teaching the complexity of the world, ways of asking questions, ways of getting underneath the hood and thinking about complex ways of the world are the things that people will actually be using in their third job long after they've forgotten the equations that we teach them. And I think that holds for AI literacy and the subject discipline in which you are teaching. And then third, there are, of course, social abilities and contexts, right? Making sure that students know how generative AI functions in the world, how it is built and trained, how it operates, what are the risks and possibilities of what it does in the world. And those, I think, are subject-specific ways of thinking about the topic. So if those are sort of what it might include, how do we get there? And the answer to this question, what do our students need, must fundamentally be answered by the students themselves, although I think it cannot and should not end at that point, right? But we need to begin with the students, right? And first sort of ask them how they are using it, right? What they are using it for, what they want to know about it. A standard question that many of us use in all of our classrooms at the beginning, what do you know and what do you want to know, right? And we need to ask them, and we need to do diagnostic pre-testing to figure out where students are in their abilities, right? Basically the updated version of a typing test, right? To make sure that people know actually how to use tools before we expect them to do so. And we need to do all of this systematically with intelligent, instrumented questions that can measure change over time as the tools evolve and as the adoption and use of them in our classrooms change over time as well. So first we need to ask students. Then we need to ask our former students, right? The ones who are out in the workplace right now, right? As scientists, engineers, and those in medical and health professions. How are they using it in their work? What from their education are they using to be AI literate in the 21st century, right? Both technically, abstractly, and socially, right? And then third, we need to ask the students' employers, right? That what do your employees know and need to know? Are we doing the best job that we can? There are structural ways in which we do this, right? Whether it's through alumni surveys, whether here at MIT it's called the visiting committee, in which we really sort of engage with corporate partners, with alumni and others, and then we need to be kind of systematically asking them what they are doing with AI, and whether students are adequately prepared. And I left out one group, which is another one, which is the faculty. And there's a real role here for the faculty, because they often are the ones who know exactly the difference between what students want and what students need. And the answer to those questions can be slightly different, right? The name for that is something called the curriculum, right? From the Latin word for a race course, right? And the task here is to develop a curriculum in all of the ways that we do that. A course of study and a plan and a path, excuse me, because as I mentioned earlier, if you are not actively building a curriculum, you are inadvertently building a hidden curriculum. And we need to get out of that business. All right, so in the last couple of minutes, the last 2 points. Third, so do something good, do something less evil. So that is about embedding social and ethical issues into every subject in the curriculum, right? That I think students do well when they confront these sort of questions with real world examples that make sense to them for their disciplines, for the careers and areas in which they intend to be working. And most importantly, don't assume that some other department is doing that job for you, right? That this is a kind of shared enterprise. And fourth, like I said, once you've done all that, do it again, right? Everything that we do in Hype Cycle Year 2 will be out of date by Christmas. Department and university policies will need to be updated as technologies and commercial products evolve, as external entities such as accrediting agencies begin to act and state their expectations, and as meaningful data emerges that sheds light on which interventions actually have measurable positive impacts on learning outcomes, right? And so we need to be able to acknowledge when things are working and when they aren't, and adjust accordingly. Now these are things like optimization and iteration. These are key elements of learning design for those of you interested in education. It's also an approach that will be extremely familiar to those of you and intuitive to those of you with engineering mindsets. But it's also familiar to those of you in the social sciences. Familiar, for example, with German sociologist Max Weber's characterization a century ago of politics as the long, slow boring of hard boards. Right? And in many ways, that's what teaching is too. The long, slow boring of hard boards, and then you get to do it again. Now, none of that is going to make the headlines in quite the way that ChatGPT and other products did in late 2022 and early 2023, but this is the task at hand for Hype Cycle Year 2, and so let's roll up our sleeves and get to work. So I'll stop there and see if there are just a few minutes of questions.
Hi, hello. Very interesting talk. I had one question when you were saying about all of the people we should talk to. So you said the current students, the alumni, the people who will be hiring them. But one group that you didn't mention was actually the ones who come before. So actually the educators in high school, or let's say K through 12. And I feel that obviously at this point, 2024, there is no curriculum yet. So it's our responsibility to create one. But in a few years, we can assume if they catch up as well, the students will hopefully already come in with some AI literacy. And what do you think would our role then be? Do we still need to, because obviously higher education is still different, but how do you see our role maybe in 2026, 7, 8 change? And do you agree that it is still important that we talk to those people as well?
Yes, absolutely, yes. And so connecting and building a bridge between K-12 and post-secondary education is going to be crucial. And in some ways, all the same principles apply to AI literacy and skill that would apply to any other aspect of prior preparation for college, right? And some of that is about content knowledge. Some of that is about being adept at the usage of a tool. Right? And I think we need to bring the same principle to it that we do with our first year curriculum of making sure that we understand the difference between talent and prior preparation, right? And that students will come from K-12 backgrounds with wildly different prior preparation in generative AI, in either understanding how it works, in learning how to, in actually sort of using it to advance their own education, and being able to sort of talk about it with their instructors. And so we'll need to level the playing field in many ways. And so I think that's a sort of task for the first year curriculum in a particular way.
Thank you.
I've got a question sort of about like ballpark how much we should focus on teaching kids how to use AI, because I think it's fairly intuitive. Like we don't have to teach kids how to use social media. They can figure it out. And when ChatGPT came out, there were 100 million users who had no training in how to use it, were able to use it well. So I wonder, like, I don't know how much we have to think about teaching kids to use this, because the kids are actually fairly good at this and probably better than a lot of the professors at it. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's just a matter of like, maybe assign them tasks and tell them to use GPT on it or whatever, instead of trying to like give an intro course on GPT. But like, how necessary is it to teach people explicitly about how these things work?
I think it's a good question. I don't know if there's a definitive answer, but I'll give you mine. And there might be 20 other opinions in the room. That I think it's not like like the social media example that you gave, right? That it's just sort of intuitive. Something like ChatGPT is only intuitive because the for-profit company that has rolled it out has designed it for consumers to find it intuitive, right? So I think the better example to think with is typing and Python, right? So these are things that we don't have to teach kids. They will eventually figure it out. And they might be typing with 2 fingers, but it would be a lot better if they learned to type. And if we could ever get rid of the QWERTY keyboard, they would be even better, right? And the same with Python, right? In many ways, we have, and we've talked about this here at MIT, sometimes we do, in many ways, have kind of hidden curriculum of Python, right? That needs to kind of be surfaced so that students are actually taught. And some of it is about diagnostic. We don't have to like have every student have an AI class. In their freshman year. I think that's a terrible idea, right? But we do need to kind of make sure that they're equipped with skills, because if we're not sort of figuring out what it means to type or what it means to code Python or what it means to use ChatGPT, then we're sort of handing them over to the company's understanding of what that should be. And I'm not singling out OpenAI as one company. There are a range of them. And then one more, and then we'll probably. Yeah.
Quick question. So I'm curious, what commitments will someone like MIT have to support the development in a lot of the classes? Because the teachers right now, they're doing a million things, and some people are using their own personal accounts to pay for the chat, as opposed to having some overall. So I was wondering if you could tell us about the commitments that MIT is making to support all these efforts.
That's a really good question. And I think the answer, I'm going to give you an interim answer, right? And because in part, so when these tools emerged, a year ago, everyone, sort of freaked out a little bit at MIT, well, not everyone. So the people who need to freaked out about things like FERPA, data privacy, affordability, whether students were going to hit, sort of limits without paying for the expensive versions of them, et cetera. And we have not yet developed a sort of MIT-wide site license that we have for some of our other programs. I think that's in part because the companies have not figured out how to provide one to universities that sort of meet a revenue model that works for them. I'm here sort of channeling some of our leaders in the Vice Chancellor's office and ISMT and other places to say that those conversations are ongoing, and I think you can expect them to roll out something like that would support, it so that it's something that all students would have access to. Because I think it's, we're not going to, we have to be able to give students these tools if we're going to expect them to use them.
Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you.